Oh, yeah. Welcome to an impromptu M3 Live. This is M3 Live Tech Talk. That song you just heard was off of my Here's to Life project. That was called You Have Problem, which featured Eric Essex on guitar. Phenomenal, phenomenal group of talented musicians. Now, this is M3 Live Tech Talks. Now, the whole idea behind this is that I just wanted to get a quick group of phenomenal musicians and artists together, and let's just talk tech. With COVID going on and with many of us being sheltered in place, it's important that we're able to just, grab some friends and have a great conversation about gear, about gear. So I just wanted to talk to them about, what are they using? What do they have going on? And if you have any questions at all, this is 100% live. So go ahead and shoot a comment and we'll throw it up on camera and probably, if you want to ask any of my guests a question, we'll throw it up on camera and see if we can get your questions answered. So without further ado, this is M3 Live Tech. The quick blurb. So make sure that if you're following me on Facebook right now, you're at M3Live.Facebook. Also, of course, please go to Instagram and follow me at Melvin M. Miller. You can also go follow me at Twitter at Melvin M. Miller. So pretty much all of my stuff is Melvin M. Miller. So just make sure you go and follow me. If you just happen to be watching this on YouTube, I've got some phenomenal friends that are going to join me. You know them, you've heard their work, you've seen them before. So let's just go ahead and introduce, put your hands together, please, for my friends. This is Trammell Starks and Quentin J. Robinson. We call him Q. Put your hands together and welcome. Hey, guys, welcome.
Hey, how's
What's
it going?
happening?
Welcome
How's
to
it
the
going?
show,
Good to be
guys.
here.
Yeah, good to
Let me
have you.
get myself centered here. There we go.
Get yourself centered here.
Oh,
Now, let's
yeah.
start off with some brief introductions. Now, Q, I know for a fact that when I made this phone call to try to get this set up, I said, "Hey Q, do you know Trammell?" And you're like, "Man, do I?" So tell me the connection between the two of you guys.
Trammell, first of all, Melvin, thank you for having me. I love this whole thing. But Trammell, I've been a distant fan of Trammell's for a minute. Just having so many different musical connections that uh, in the circle, everybody knows everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And his reputation in his work definitely precede him. And I just had never had the privilege of working with him before, and COVID kind of brought that together. Um, I was looking for a mix engineer for my upcoming single, The QR Code, and I was talking to another great friend of ours, Wes Bird,
Mm-hmm.
and he let me hear some stuff that Tremel was doing for him, and another friend of mine, Lewis Newsom, who we're all familiar with. He did his last release, and it was just amazing. I was like, wow, like here is a mix that the drums are present but not loud. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, I think mix engineers don't necessarily understand what that means. Like, so they automatically assume volume. But anyway, I'm pretty sure we'll get into that. But I reached
Yeah.
out to I got Trembl's information. But we actually met on a Rhythm Jets gig, which is a another artist, local artist that Tremble did some work for.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always a fan of how musical his production was, as well as his mixing. So I approached him about collaborating to make some music together, and then by that time I had got frustrated with trying to find a mix engineer that understood what I was trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And after hearing Trammell's work, I was like, "Hey, can you mix my record?" And the rest is history. So now we're old friends by now. That's why we look alike.
Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I get called Q all the time. You wouldn't believe it.
Hey, same
Uh,
thing. It's like, oh, Trem, I didn't know you play drums. I'm like, I'm not
yeah,
Tremel, I'm Q.
I
Yeah,
know.
so
I know. Yeah.
That's funny.
So,
Go
no,
ahead,
that's
Trammell.
great. And I'll just back that up with I had heard so much about Q working with people I knew, and his reputation definitely preceded him. And every time I remember when Vance Kelly, the Rhythm Jets, Q came to and did some gigs with them, and just was just totally blown away. And my friend Joseph Patrick Moore out in Las Vegas has done a lot of work with Q, and so it's a small circle pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And uh, he's just, he's the guy. He's the guy, and it's been an honor. His new material, his new song, which is underway, is amazing. And I have to say, from a mixing standpoint,
Q.
when the songs are arranged well and certainly performed well, that makes the mix engineer's job so much easier, because you're not
Oh, wow.
fighting 10 things in one part of the frequency spectrum. You got guitars
Sure.
and keys and strings and 9 things, like they can't all fit. So it's not only the musicianship is just off the chain, and the writing and arranging is equally on par. So it makes my
Wow.
job a lot easier. Yeah.
So
Thank you. I didn't know we were going to start with the mushy stuff so early.
Oh.
Thank you.
So I'm just curious. So Chalman, when you get to my trumpet part on Q's have you heard my trumpet on that part?
He told me it's on the way.
Oh,
It's on the
okay,
way.
okay.
Yeah,
I was just
it's on the way. Yeah, he said he was trying to get you, get you.
He was
get
too
you
busy for
roped
this
in.
one, so I ended up having to get sax because he was
Oh,
like,
okay.
Yeah.
you don't have the cachet nor the budget to get my attention, Trammell. So that's the reason why I had to go with sax in this one.
That is
so.
funny. That is funny. So Trammell, seriously. So now we know that I happen to be a musician and Q happens to be a musician, but along with mix engineer, you're also a musician. You play keys.
Yeah.
And you played with some phenomenal artists.
Well, thank you. I had some good fortune way back when, and whether or not I claim to be a keyboard player depends on what are the keyboard players in the room at the time. So, if Wes Bird is around, when West is in the room, I don't claim to play keyboards. Or Tyrone Jackson,
he's
no,
all
never.
right. He's
all right.
Yeah.
But thank you. I started out as a keyboard player, and for many years, and then gradually started recording and mixing. We're recording and going to other studios to mix. I had the good fortune to work for a record label throughout pretty much all the 90s as a staff producer, quote unquote, which is a job description that I don't think exists anymore. And I was really lucky to snare that. So I got to go to work every day, which was in a studio, and make records. And I made a lot of really crappy sounding records, but it was a great learning experience.
I think we all have.
And,
we all have.
Yeah. And so, I started doing my own mixes because I got tired of telling them, no, not that, no, not that one, and just, it was, they were great engineers, but just trying to communicate your vision as a musician to an engineer became sometimes challenging, depending on, the circumstance. And so I thought, well, I'll learn. And I would mix my own projects, but it was a long time before I felt confident enough to say to Quentin, sure, I'll mix your record. That was a big leap for me, to going from mixing my own stuff to mixing and actually putting the term mix engineer around my neck. I just did it for myself. But so over the years I've evolved, and now I'm much more comfortable with that title. But yeah, so it's a blend. It's all part of the creative process anymore, I think.
Well, let me ask this question, because I know back in the day when I released my first record, which was Innocent Bystander, one of the tracks was actually featured, if you have it, on the Weather Channel.
Oh wow!
The track "Just Let It Go" was actually on the. I got a call from somebody like in LA talking about, "Hey, I hear that's your." So I know that Trammell, you have a connection with the Weather Channel as well, right?
I do, or did.
Yeah,
I did. Yeah. Also throughout the 90s, when I was in elementary school, we'll just leave it at that. I first started working with them, scoring documentaries. They used to do, every time there was a hurricane or a tornado, they would do a documentary, and it's Hurricane Andrew and all, and whatever. And this is I don't mean this to sound crass, but I used to say every time there's a natural disaster, I'd get a gig about 6 months later from the Weather Channel. That's an awful thing to say. I'm sorry. Anyway, but it's true. So I did
awful
all kinds
but true. Okay.
Awful but true. I did all kinds of videos: hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, fires, seriously, you name it. Anytime there was some weather related, and you learn a lot about the science behind the weather, and it was fascinating. Um, and really sad because most natural disasters inevitably there's a scene of a family walking through what used to be their house, either from a
Yeah.
hurricane or fire or whatever. So they're very uh, dramatic. But anyway, so I did a bunch of documentaries for the Weather Channel for a few years, and then one day in around 1995 or so, uh, I got a call and they said, they had this local on the eights thing. I don't know if they still have it. This was back before NBC bought them out,
Hmm.
and apparently they were using music pretty freely, commercial music, and I guess they got tired of paying the royalties, the broadcast royalties. So they wanted to own some music. And I was right in the middle of my tenure at the record label. And I thought, sure, I'll do this. And it was just a gig.
Hmm.
I ended up writing, I think, 43 or 44 little
Wow.
songs for them. And they were
Wow.
very kind of smooth jazz of the era. And I
Hmm.
did them
Hmm.
pretty quick. Uh, but it was a gig, and I thought, okay, yeah, that's great. I'll do these Weather Channel things. Um, but I had bigger fish to fry in my day gig, and I didn't really think much about the Weather Channel thing. But some of the I had fun with the material. Joe Granston played a lot of trumpet on it.
Hmm.
Sam Skelton played sax on some of it. Um,
Uh,
The beast.
yeah,
The beast.
it was
The
all
right.
right.
beast is yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah. Sam is an alien. I don't think he's from Earth, but
he's definitely not from Earth.
Yeah. He's
Jeez.
another. Yeah.
um, but so anyway, I did these tunes, turned it in. So what happened? And I'll make this short. I don't mean to get off into the weeds on this,
It's
but
okay.
uh, uh, local on the eights plays 6 times an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so they played these songs I wrote that much for 2 years. So talk
Wow.
about heavy airplay. That
Hmm.
and I thought, okay, that's kind of cool. And I tried my best to get them to let me put these on CD, put a Weather Channel logo on the front, and sell them in record stores because through the record label, I had an easy into that at the time.
Right.
Hmm.
Seems like a quaint notion now, but at any rate, and they were like, "Well, we sell umbrellas and we sell cups, but we don't know about music." And I fought that forever. Anyway, here we are 26 years later, 25 years later. Still get calls of people wanting this music. I got 3 last week, and
Wow.
so that just shows you it's not that the music is so great, but it just got such intense airplay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, had I been smarter, I would have gone down that path and focused on smooth jazz starting in the '90s, and worked that. But I had all these other things I was trying to do, and that was just kind of a side gig. So meanwhile, all those other things I was doing, nobody, it's gone. But I still get the occasional call about the Weather Channel music. So that's my little
Wow.
story there.
That's pretty
Wow.
incredible.
That's real incredible. So you touched on something. You touched on something a minute ago, Tramo. You said that uh, when you got into mixing, you got
Hmm.
into it because you knew what sound you wanted to hear, and it was more
Yeah.
difficult. It was easier for you to just do it yourself than to, you know, keep telling somebody what to do over and over and over again. Correct? So that's
Well, yes, yes, and I'll say in theory it's easier, but then again you realize, okay, I've turned that particular part up, but now why doesn't it sound good? So then you get into this thing about, okay, how to learn EQ and how to learn compression and effects and all the myriad things that come with learning to mix. But
hmm
yes, from a purely aesthetic standpoint, I had, uh, I I I teach this class, a music production class for Oklahoma State University, and the
hmm
what I tell the kids, because they've had their music majors and various, and so they've had all that kind of training, and they're learning about quote the studio, and I try to tell them, I do tell them, number one, the studio is we're here to create art, and the technical part, like we're talking about tonight, is critical, and you got to love it and have an obsession with it. But ultimately, our goal is to make chill bumps on people's arms,
hmm
and and so never lose sight of that. But the whole point of, and kind of getting circling back around to your point is, um, I tell them, as a producer, if you're going to put on the music producer hat, uh, that implies the music producer. One way to define that, I like to say, is you're the keeper of the vision. and of the
Mm.
piece. And now that implies that there's a vision to start with. So assuming, so it's the producer's role or the artist's role to have this image in their mind, and whether it's through another engineer or through engineering yourself, trying to, get to that place that you see this creatively.
Hmm. Because that's kind of
Anyway,
why I called both of you all, because I know that each of us has become self-sufficient, whether that is based on desire, whether that's based on our love for tech, whatever it is, we've become self-sufficient, which is hence
yes,
why I decided to even do this type of situation. I had to figure out what equipment I needed, how to work it, how to do all the technical
yeah,
pieces. I had to nerd out,
yeah,
so that's kind of why we're here is, if there's anybody watching or listening, it's about being self-sufficient at, to some degree at this point. I would never claim to be a drummer, but I know that I can do what I need to do to program enough drums to hand it off to Q, to say, hey man,
yep,
can you
yep.
cue this out? You know what I'm saying?
That's
Or
right.
if I
Yeah,
have a keyboard part, I know enough about keys to get the idea and then give it to somebody else and just have them completely transform it into what it's supposed to be, because I'm not a keyboard player. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
I definitely feel that like this entire studio thing for me was just based on I'm an early riser,
hmm.
and a lot of engineers uh some engineers don't get up before noon. you know so and then also particularly if I'm creating, I like to be able to control the environment, my creative space. And a lot of times, if I'm renting space in someone else's studio or someone else's home, it's kind of like going to sleep at someone's house. You may get to sleep, but you're not comfortable.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So I wanted to be able to create my own environment where I am most comfortable, where my templates are set up, where I can get to work immediately, as opposed to having to lug drums in and do a 2 3 hour sound check. And Melvin can attest to this. We've literally he sent me a track in one day, and by that evening he's had something back, at least a
Absolutely.
mock demo of it, simply
right.
because I could literally sit down, open up Pro Tools, and get to work, as opposed to the tedious thing of, you guys know because you're in this industry, but for the listeners out there, when you hire a drummer and you go into a studio, a lot of times the time starts from when the drummer shows up,
Hmm.
not from when you start recording.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's getting the gear in, setting up the kit, figuring out the sweet spot in the room where you're going to get the best sound of the drums, put the microphones on the drums based on the tune that you're listening to, all of these different things, as opposed to being able to go immediately. So my turnaround time became quicker. My overhead became lower simply because I have my own spot, which means that I can pass that savings on to whatever client I'm using, that's using my services, as opposed to having to charge them just to make a nominal fee. I won't say what, but I remember doing tracks where I would charge someone $300 for one track and make $25
mm,
because I had to pay the studio, I
Hmm.
had to
Hmm.
pay the engineer, and then when you start taking out time equity and sweat equity, loading the drums up, getting there, that's gas money, that's time away and doing other things. It just didn't seem worth it outside of the music edification of it. Like, it was not profitable. So then it became, do I really want to do this versus having passion projects where I've told Melvin, hey, send it to me and we'll work the rest out later.
Hmm.
Let's
hmm,
just get something done,
Hmm.
simply because I have the ability to do that. I wouldn't be able to do that for my friends if I didn't own my own space. So, um, to that point, Trumbull said something that's very important. Um, sometimes the biggest or the best inventions are birthed out of a need, as opposed to this grand scheme. you know um the sound that Trumbull was hearing in his head, he couldn't find anybody that he can convey that to uh, confidently and get the result that he wanted. So he had to create that own lane so that, obviously there are ancillary things that are attached to that, learning how to EQ and use compression correctly and reverb and all of those things. But because he couldn't find, and that even goes beyond, the engineering side, that's just in life. Sometimes when you can't find what it is you're looking for, that means that the universe is trying to tell you the onus is on you to create that lane yourself. And it's not crazy. It may be unpopular, but it's not crazy, because if it was crazy, you wouldn't be able to conceive of it. So I think a lot of times we get lazy and we're just like, oh, well, I can't find anybody to do it, and we just leave it there. So Melvin, I mean, the same thing with you. It's like you've created this lane. I'm spoiled when I listen to your records and the musicianship on those records, and then someone else says, hey man, I play trumpet, listen to my stuff. Like there's a level I was like, yeah,
I appreciate that, man. Yeah.
But no, but seriously, it just kind of goes back to that creating your own lane. And a lot of times that means that you become a master, a jack of all trades. I'm not the best engineer, but I can get my stuff to, to a point where I can pass it off to someone that is proficient in engineering,
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
And then also, rubbing up against other sharp knives in the drawer keeps you sharp as well. So like Trevor and I literally had a conversation last night about mastering. I literally called him last night, less than 12 hours ago, 24 hours ago. I called him and I was like, hey man, what's up with mastering? So we got into a tech conversation, and Melvin, we've gotten into years of tech conversations. So I'm glad to be here. But I just wanted to say that, like, out of that necessity, I think was birthed, a something that you can't even go back to even thinking about outsourcing, a demo, or outsourcing, a mixing job, simply because Trammell does that well, and Melvin, you do what you do so well. So I'm grateful for those knocks or those roadblocks of not necessarily finding a person to do it for me, because it forced me to do it myself.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, if there's anybody out there that has any questions, feel free to shoot us a question or a comment or anything like that. But I also wanted to say back to the necessity being a mother of invention. When I remember when I first came to Atlanta, I was teaching. I was actually teaching at a middle school, and one of the custodians came past. He's like, "Hey man, you need to go down to the A train, which was in the underground at that point. Hey man, you need to go down to the A train and check out my part." And I said, I blew him off. Why did I blow him off? Because of his position at that particular school. Isn't that an asinine thing to do? I was like, yeah. So eventually he kept coming because he heard me down there practicing. He kept coming. He was like, hey man, please go. I said, okay. So I finally went down to the A train. Good friend of mine who is passed on, Rod Smith. If you've never heard Rod Smith I'm talking about a beast on the saxophone, like Rod Smith, Joe Jennings with Life Force, Howard Nicholson, all those guys.
Wow.
So Rod gave me my first break ever in Atlanta down at the A train.
Wow.
And he told me, he said, hey man, he said, as a trumpet player, to your point about the saxophone that you were joking about, Q, he said, as a trumpet player, a lot of times you're going to have to create your own. You're going to have to be your own. You're going to have to do your own as a trumpet player. Sax players will get, you'll get calls, but you have to be and do your own. And I still live by that to this day. I got to the point where I figured out that to be Melvin, I had to, get a band together. And it transitioned from a band name to Melvin Miller And over these years, it has transitioned from Melvin Miller to just simply Melvin Miller. And it's been hard, but it was necessary for me to sustain me and for me to bring my vision of me to life. You know, so
Sure.
it's stories like that and things like that that make us decide to become nerds. You know what I'm saying? I
Right.
decided that I wanted a website, and this was years ago. I said I want a website, and at that
Yeah.
point, websites were like ridiculously expensive,
Right.
ridiculously expensive. So I said I'll learn how to do it myself. So I sat
Hmm.
down one summer, and I remember I learned Adobe Go Live, and I had to learn some
Wow.
HTML programming. I had to sit
Oh
down
man.
and figure out how to do. So when I tell people I'm a nerd, like, yeah, I sat down and learned Adobe Go Live, and I learned Flash. I learned
Wow.
Flash.
Yeah.
Flash was the medium at that point in time. So I learned
Right.
Yeah.
Adobe
Right.
Go Live and Flash just to get like my earrings to sparkle and to get the music to play. So I sat down and
Yeah.
learned those things. And to this day, I can't, like you said, Q, I can't envision asking somebody to do a website for me
Mm.
because I know what I want, Tremble. I know what I wanted,
Yeah.
and for me to
Exactly.
sit
Yeah.
down and
You
tell
have that
somebody,
vision.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You have a vision.
so Q, do me a favor, right quick. Set this up for me. There is a video where you're sitting in the room by yourself and you have on headphones and you're playing. Can you set that video up for me? This is the one where you were doing the I think it's the Rogers and
The Rogers and Hammerstein. Okay, so
I didn't want to say it because I
for
didn't want to mess up your
people,
intro.
no, it's fine. So I have been over the past few years knocking on the a new door of genre, which is Broadway theater.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, this summer, because a lot of my New York friends, musician friends, they live in apartments. So they're not able to play an acoustical instrument and in their apartment. So a music director that I met on another show a couple of few years back was music directing this only make believe gala, but they were doing it virtually because of our COVID situation. And what you're going to actually hear is the finale song, which was a tribute to Rogers and Hammerstein. And if you don't know who they are two of the most prolific Broadway composers around. So this is three or four songs of theirs that they kind of meshed into a hodgepodge of arrangement for the actual gala. So they sent me the 2-track and the clicks and the sample rate and all of the different things that I needed to line up their audio with my own audio live, and I shot my video, lined it up, and sent it back. And a couple of weeks ago, this is what was seen by millions of people. Once again, the only Make Believe Foundation is basically the Make a Wish Foundation for Broadway.
Gotcha.
So you have a lot of different Broadway musical stars that will lend their talents, time, and treasure to help terminally ill children, whether it be visiting them or, last wishes for a terminally ill child that wants to, I don't know, go to Disney World or, see a show or whatever. So, yeah, so this is the only Make Believe Foundation Virtual Gala finale.
So great introduction, but before we jump into it, since this is Tech Talk, what
Mhm.
exactly are you using? Go a little more details. Like, what are your mics? What are you using in terms of your
Oh,
mics? What's your
okay.
what's your
So
tech? What's your tech?
microphones, I'm using Audix microphones. I love Audix microphones simply because I get the warmth and the clarity. A lot of times with microphones, they color the sound a little bit. So between the preamps that you use and the microphones, while you may get the sound, it might not be the most accurate sound of microphones. And because I'm playing drums right now, that is 14 microphones. So I need something that's going to give me the exact sound that not only that I'm hearing in my head, But when I send something out to a mix engineer or a producer, I want them to know that this is the clarity of sound. This is not um, they should sound like drums. So I'm using Audix microphones, D2s on the toms, D4s on the floor toms, dynamic i5 microphone, and a pencil condenser, so I get the best of both worlds as far as the warmth of the dynamic and the crack of a small pencil condenser. I'm using two Rode NT1As for room mics, stereo room mics. I'm using Audix CX112Bs for overheads. I'm using a Yamaha sub kick to give me that low end frequency on my kick drum. On the inside of the kick drum, I'm using a D6 microphone. On the bottom side of the snare, I'm using another pencil condenser just to be able to capture the essence of the snare. All of that is running into my PreSonus Studio Live board, which is it feels a bit analogish simply because it has long throw faders. But the beautiful thing about this board is, as much as it is a mixing console, it is also an interface. And with 14 microphones, I needed a lot of interfaces, a lot of inputs. So these inputs have the same preamps. And do you remember the Digimax LT, the outboard gear in the studio that everybody used to use? I think everybody's kind of graduated now to maybe like the Focusrite stuff or the UAD stuff. But the Digimax LT for years was the standard as far as pre's in the studio. PreSonus decided to take 32 of those preamps that they used in the Digimax LT, which used to be in quantities of 8, and gave me 32 of them.
Oh wow!
So the sound that I get is clean, it's clear, it's all tone and drums, as opposed to the white noise and the hiss that you will get in some units with bad preamps. So the mix between the microphones and the preamps married together, I'm getting the true essence of what my drums sound like, as opposed to what they, oh, those are drums. You can actually hear a clarity of those drums. To that point, a lot of times I'm often disappointed when I hear the final mix back, because once some engineers start putting all of their stuff on there, it's like, hey, you killed the drum sound. Like, I like drums who sound like drums, and if we're doing a pop record where it should sound MIDI-ish, but drums should sound like drums, and that's what I wanted to create here. I wanted to create, when I send Trammell or Melvin a track, they know what drums there are, even to the point I did a track for Melvin, and he was like, hey man, that's not really the right snare sound that I'm looking for. I changed the snare and I changed the microphones just to make sure that I got the right tone that he was looking for. So, just placement and knowing exactly what to do. I didn't have to do too much as far as the interface was concerned, but just knowing, what microphones to use to capture the sound of that particular track, was important. So that's the tech stuff. Like for me on this end, that's pretty much what it is.
So real quick, the video that we're going to see is you just sitting behind your drums with nothing else. So what are you listening to? What's so you're coming back through Pro Tools? Is
right.
That what you're
so
using?
I use Pro Tools. I use Pro Tools for tracking drums. If I'm programming, I'm using Ableton. But what I am listening to, a demo mix of what the pianist is playing, and you'll hear that. What you won't hear is I'm also on a click track. And for those out there that don't know what a click track is, it's basically an audio metronome. And that is the way that we're able to sync everything up. Because if the pianist that sent me the track is locked to the same tempo and the same click track, when I play on top of that and I'm listening to that and him, when you put them together, it will sound like we were in the same room. So
you mean you were keeping a steady beat?
Yeah,
Trammell,
that's
he was
that's,
keeping a
that's
steady
different for
beat.
drummers.
Wow.
No, man, you're supposed to chop over everything. You know?
Well, I want to send it before we play the video. I want to send a quick shout out to D. Lucas, who is joining us. D is a
Yeah.
phenomenal sax player, and
D,
so just want to
yeah.
say
up,
what up,
man?
D?
What's up,
What up, D.
D?
Lucas?
I almost played with him. Kerry called me for a gig, and then I wasn't good enough. And so D was probably like, "Who's that loser?" So I think he got Terrell Sass or somebody to play with him.
Oops.
So
Oops. On that note, D, see what you started, D. Lucas? On that note, this is Q. We're just going to play a little bit of this right quick. Here we go.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Q.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, that was great.
Thank
D
you.
is
Thank
laughing
you.
at you at your comments.
Well, is he laughing at my performance? See, I don't know. It kind of came in a little, you know.
No, he said that before the performance.
Oh, okay.
So Trammell. So here's my question
Yes,
for
sir.
you, Trammell. So given the fact that we are talking about being this is for you, Q. This is for you. He said the drums
Thank
sound
you.
great.
Thank you.
So it wasn't the drums, it was the other. Yeah. But
Oh,
Trammell,
okay.
we know that you actually have a studio behind you, and
I do.
you've made some improvements. But we're talking about being self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Has COVID or anything kind of hampered the whole studio environment for you, or you know?
Yeah. Well, I've basically been shut down since March.
Mhm.
Although I just this week though opened up. I had a great saxophone player from Biloxi in town, who's the brother of John Chalden. Q knows John, a great drummer here in town,
Yeah.
and his brother Jordan is an awesome sax player. So we started a project back in, I don't know, May or something, and with the intention of having him come into town end of July, and shooting for a release to radio in September. Well, then COVID blew up in the summer, and we decided the better part of valor was to hold back. And so then we, um, about a month or so ago, chose this week to have him come in again. Well, lo and behold, COVID's blowing up again. But we went ahead with it, and everybody's do the best we can with distancing and masks and all that sort of things. I did, some things here in the studio to make that a little more comfortable. And so I have opened up. Just bizarrely, in this time of COVID, my plan was to open up for this week, do some sessions, and then basically close down and quarantine, be sure everybody's cool. I had a session planned for this morning, actually, and about an hour before the session was to start, My friend, I can't call him a client because he's a very dear friend, but
Mhm.
also clients his project, called, and his stepson was diagnosed with COVID this morning. So
Oh
that was
wow.
awful. So
Yikes.
that's kind of where we are. And tomorrow, a good friend, Gary Motley, who's talk about amazing piano players.
Beast. Yeah.
Um, yeah, he's teaches at Emory, as you guys know, and they did the Emory Big Band uh, projects, a Christmas project with featuring Melvin Jones was the artist in residence this semester for them, and so we're mixing that. Gary's coming in the morning to listen. I got the mixes started tonight. Actually, is what I was doing before we started this event. So at any rate, so has COVID changed? Yeah, I mean it's done two things. It's definitely I've been fortunate to keep working on remote projects, mixing wise. Quentin and I have worked on a couple of things. Keyboard player in LA named Ted Howe. And actually, there's some more things coming down the pike for him. So anywhere where people can send you files and you can work on them by yourself and send them back, that's been fine. Mixing wise, audiobooks, whatever. In terms of people coming into the studio, up until this week, that hasn't happened. Will happen again tomorrow, then probably shut down. So I'm really dying to be able to open up again, like we all are. We're all tired of this stuff. If there, it's not. I won't say it's a positive, but something that's happened because of COVID that I normally wouldn't have been able to do is I've spent better part of the last 6 months renovating my studio,
Hmm.
so kind of in slow motion, and so I never would have been able to have it torn apart if I had people coming in.
Mm, yeah.
Any reno I would do would be like over Christmas break or something as much as I can in 2 weeks and then run with it. So this time I had it. I redid my tracking room that I'm sitting in now, and then got the tracking room finished. It's like, well, now the control room looks kind of weak, so I got So it's been some back and forth, but uh, but now everything's actually just as of a few days ago, as Quentin knows. I'm back up and running, and just trying to get caught up. I've got some mixes that people are waiting on. I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
So anyway, uh,
I might know
no,
one of
but
them.
yeah, but so combination, that school. I mentioned the school thing earlier. They decided to cut the semester off at Thanksgiving when the kids go home, have them not come back. So all of a sudden, a week or so ago, it's like, oh, this thing you thought you had 6 8 weeks to do, now you have three. So
Right.
that's caused some, but that's just dealing with life. I have to say, I mean, I knock on wood, have been fortunate to get through this so far relatively unscathed, and just hoping and praying for those that have not been so fortunate with
Absolutely.
the COVID or with related issues. My heart goes out to that. It's been a tough year for all of us.
Absolutely. So, are you
Yeah.
able? Is your camera mobile enough to give us a tour
Yeah, absolutely.
and
I'm
talk
gonna.
us through
I
what?
earlier. Sure thing. Earlier I tried to switch to the back camera, and I seem to disconnect myself every time. So bear with me. I'm going to just turn it around. I can't really see there. Um, what's I don't know how this looks on the camera. I'll turn the lights up. So I'm in a townhouse, and when I moved in, there's a totally unfinished basement, uh, and so a typical exposed rafters, concrete, no walls, and just bare concrete floor, and so I started building it out. So this is the tracking space. There's a um, I don't know how much you can see there, but on the nerd end of the spectrum, if you guys want to talk about room acoustics for a minute, that's something I find fascinating and try to to put to work in here. This is square concrete box, not exactly what you want for creating sound. Now my light's flashing. Let me. So I and it has a typical 8 foot ceiling, so
Hmm.
not a great environment for drums or anything like that. So with all the reading I've done, I've had a number of studios over the years and built them out. Um, the best thing to do in a small room is to make the room disappear as much as you can, because you're never going to get a great
Mm,
drum room out of a square concrete box. So the best thing to do is make it go away and use nice reverb to replace that. So to that end, you can't just put up some egg crate foam. Like it kind of drives me nuts if you go to a Guitar Center or something, you'll see these acoustic kits, and it's some Auralex sorry, Orlex,
Right.
foam panels, and you put them up on the wall, and yeah, they'll help high frequency slap echo, but but they do nothing for the mid range and the in particular low end. So you end up with a really muddy sound with that stuff. So what you have to do to really attenuate and balance the frequencies is you have to have a lot of absorption. And so what I did in here, this is the typical, you can't really see the ceiling because it's blacked out, but um, typical rafters with about a foot, space. So that's totally full of acoustic treatment. It's Owens Corning 703, and then a combination of 703, some 9 inches of pink insulation, normal attic insulation, which is a good bass trap if you have enough of it. And also there's some uh, mineral wool, Roxel mineral wool, and parts of it. So a couple things. The sidewalls have 4 inches of 703, and it's mounted 4 inches off the wall.
So that creates
And
the air gap. That gives you the air gap.
yeah, creates an air gap. Yeah, and if anybody happens to be listening that's not familiar with that idea, what happens is the sound waves pass through the foam. Uh, Whatever the foam doesn't attenuate hits the concrete or the wood wall, whatever's behind it, and tries to reflect back through the treatment again. So in essence, you're doubling the thickness, effectively doubling the thickness of whatever your acoustic foam is. Um, so that's what I did. It's really dry in here. It's amazingly dry, but the whole point is to make it dry and flat across all frequencies. So if you just put up that Orlex stuff like we talked about or whatever Sonex, it's going to attenuate the high end, but it's not going to do anything. It's not dense enough to do anything for mid range and low frequencies. So you're going to end up with a muddy sound, boomy, muddy sound. So you want to basically the idea is that all you hear, what the microphone hears, is just the instrument and no room. And then we put the room, whatever space you want, back in with reverb and after the fact. So anyway, this is the tracking room. It's about 12 by 20. I made it sort of a seating area. I don't know how I'm holding my camera right. On this end, so it's a place where an artist, the artist can come, hang out, close the curtain, and they have like a living room / tracking space. Happens to be drums in here today that we ended up not using, but and then this is the control room with Jay Leno on the TV. Let's see if I can back up here. The other thing I did with COVID, I built a new workstation table. I had an Argosy station that I used for about 20 years, and I just wanted a change of scenery. So one of the most important things you can do for those, I know a lot of people are getting into home recording now because of COVID, and learning about room acoustics. And one of the most important things you can do is put some deadening material on the ceiling. And so the same thing here, there's 703 panels, and then behind it, when I had the drywall put in, there's a hole you can't see, and that's full of more 703. So there's a big, the sound comes up from the speakers and doesn't reflect back down.
So hence the idea of creating a cloud per se. Some would call it a cloud.
Yeah, that's called a cloud commonly, and that's really important both for tracking and for mixing. That will help. That will do wonders. If you're in a space where you're recording, whatever instrument, and you can't build it out, at least put a comforter, tack it to the ceiling. Anything you can do to get rid of the reflections off the ceiling will help tremendously.
Hey, Trevor, hold on one second. Anyway, hold on 1 second. Hey guys, you got Justice Michael out there joining us. Justice Michael's.
Hey, Justice.
What up, man?
What's up, man?
You joined just in time to hit his clinic, man.
He is a monster. Oh my God!
Because I know he's building he's built his own little spot as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, he should be talking and not me.
Listen, I want to be retired by the time Justice gets out of school, okay? Because he's taking everybody's job. Yeah. Everybody.
Oh, cool.
I'm sorry, Trevor. Go ahead, man. I just wanted to acknowledge Justice joining us.
So that's it. Just there's the the back of the room. This is actually the space underneath the stairwell, and so it's 3 feet deep, and that's full of pink insulation, 3 feet, which again is not good for for high frequencies, but if you have a lot of it, it's a really good bass trap. And one last thing,
Mm.
these speaker stands um, are boxes that I built, and they're full of sand, and they do not move. They're about 300 pounds, and that amazingly enough helped the clarity of the speakers. It was a
Mm.
noticeable difference just by having them anchored on heavy stands.
So that
So
that quote unquote separates them from the sand
yeah,
by.
yeah, well, what the speakers are just really the boxes are really solid. I have these. I don't know if you can see underneath here. Can't.
Mm-hmm. We can see them.
These what do they call them? Can't remember the name of it. Um, Isomax, something like that. They're like shock absorbers for the speaker. So this doesn't
Mm-hmm.
move. The speaker kind of floats on these shock absorbers, and the idea is that there's no resonance. It's just the speaker's free to move in the space, and it really it had a surprising um, made a surprising improvement in the quality of the sound, the definition, the clarity. It's like a camera lens that suddenly just got way more in focus. It was pretty cool.
Mm.
So if I heard you
So that
correctly, Tremor, you said you have like where your speakers are. There's
mhm.
3 feet behind the speakers of insulation, and on your back wall, there's another 3 feet.
Well, there's 3 feet on the back wall, and that's to function as a bass trap. So the sound goes there, and low end in particular. Um, there are corner traps behind this wall in the front, and some foam. So it's kind of a combination of absorption and reflectivity. Um, I don't know if that's actually if it'd be better. I've wondered if that should be reflective or not,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems to work
Mm.
well, and that's the way it is, at least for now. So yeah.
So I've got 2 questions I want to ask really quick. Tremor, I want to ask you this one, and then D. Lucas has a question for both of you all. But
Hmm.
so I know that that's your living space. So in
Yep.
terms of the terminology, and for you as well, Q, in terms of the terminology of soundproofing and sound treating,
Mm. Good one.
your space, Tremor, with all of that insulation that you have, if you go
Yes.
upstairs, do you hear anything, or is it soundproofed? Now, go ahead. I'm sorry. Either one of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Those are two different things. Soundproofing is a lot harder to do because you're trying to. I mean, eh, when I had the drywall put in, the behind the drywalls, there's stuff called Safe and Sound that you can get
Mm-hmm.
at Home Depot,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mineral wool, and I didn't know it was like what's mineral wool. It seems like it's a kind of insulation. Um, what's interesting about it, we're all nerds here, so you guys will appreciate this. Uh, is mineral? I saw on one of those How It's Made shows. If you've ever seen that show, I'm really exposing my
That's my
nerddom now.
It's
that's my
okay.
jam.
It's okay. It's mine
Yeah.
That's my
too.
jam.
So,
Yeah.
it's funny. My son and I would laugh about it. It's like this week on How It's Made, cuckoo clocks, hot air balloons, saxophones. It's just all over the map. But anyway, one day they had mineral wool. And so it was the exact same brand as the stuff I have here. And what it is they take some kind of stone, limestone, or I don't know, it's rock, and they melt it. And if you can imagine a cotton candy machine that spins, you know how it spins, melts sugar and spins it,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
it's a cotton candy machine, but it's got molten rock in it, and they spin it into this stuff, and that's what mineral wool is. It's basically spun rock.
Wow.
So consequently, it's fireproof. So it's a great, and it's also a good sound dampener because of the density. It's not a good thermal insulator like fiberglass, but it's so that's all in all the ceiling. You can still hear through it though. When
Mm-hmm.
you're upstairs, if somebody's playing down here, you still, but it's attenuated more than it would be normally,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't make it go away. The only thing from what the reading I've done over the years that can totally soundproof a space is like mass, concrete. A lot, because the lower the frequency goes, the harder it is to trap it. You can attenuate mid and high frequencies easier than you can low frequencies because the low frequency
Mhm.
waveform is so long, it'll just pass right through whatever. So, and there's some formula. It's got to be like a fourth a wall, like a concrete wall, has to be to be effective, has to be a fourth the depth of the waveform is. And so I can't remember off the top of my head, but like a 60 cycle waveform is, I don't know, 30 feet long or something. And so you'd have to have, a 6 or 8 foot solid wall to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
Not entirely, you can do it less than that. But the point is, it's hard to stop low frequencies, and so soundproofing is harder. Sound still escapes my space, but what we want to do in sound treatment, acoustic treatment, as opposed to acoustic deadening or soundproofing, is to eliminate reflections in the space. Like if I'm sitting here in the mix position and the speakers, they're firing, at whatever degrees they fire, and sound is hitting the ceiling and bouncing back down. So if I hear that sound, that's going to be, again, not great mathematician, but there's a formula that'll tell you how many milliseconds the sound arrives bouncing off the ceiling versus the direct sound, and it's not a lot. It might be, I don't know, couple of milliseconds, whatever, but it's enough to smear the sound and to create phase issues. So what we want is what they call a reflection free zone, where you're mixing. Sorry about this light. You guys are showing the light in your space. So we want to create a reflection free zone. So you're just hearing the sound coming out of the speakers and not the reflections of the room itself. You want a little bit of room reflection, because you don't, otherwise we just create an anechoic chamber and put up 3 feet of foam on every surface, and that's weird too. But so there's a balance. But I don't know how, if my room is, how perfect it is from that perspective, but it works for me. And the really what we're trying to do is create a mix in here that we go out to the car or go to a sound system or play back on a computer, and it sounds more or less like, and that's hard to get. And the hardest thing about that tends to be low frequencies, balancing low frequencies. But we want mixes to be portable, as they say. So
I don't know if y'all can see it, but to your point about Rockwall or the wool, I went during my nerd phase in my own space. I said I needed some panels so that I could sit in here and record my horn. That was my whole, I wanted to just simply record my horn. So that black panel behind me is homemade. I went to Home Depot, got the Rockwall, the 4-inch, the 4-foot pieces, and built it. Got the fabric. There's a 2-inch air gap behind those. And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's about 6 of them in the room. And simply, I kind of, like you said, I wanted to kind of remove my trumpet reflections so that I can get the best sound I can of my horn, and then be able to add the room back with delay or reverb or whatever. But
you can hear it on your microphone when you're speaking. I mean, that's one of the things I notice a lot. I'm sure we all notice in this day and age where news programs, everybody's broadcasting from home, and you can tell some it's annoying to hear all the room tone sometimes, some more than others, but it's things we get used to. But you can tell your room is treated well just by the way your voice sounds.
See, that's the nerd in us. That's the nerd in us.
That's it. Absolutely.
If D is still with us, I'm going to throw this up on the screen real quick. This is for either one of y'all. He said, is there really a big difference in recording in the various bit rates, 24, 48, or 96?
Ooh, let me take this one.
Now, let me answer that real quick, Q. For us nerds, there's a difference, maybe, but what about to the listener? So go elaborate on both of those if you don't mind.
All right, so this is what I will say, and this is the way that it was broken down to me, and it makes all of the sense in the world. Everybody eats food, so let's take a sandwich, okay? Let's take 16, 24, 48, and 96. Okay, the lesser the number, the less meat or fillings you have between those two pieces of bread, right? As you get more, let's say 96, all of those ingredients that make this big this dogwood sandwich, it's literally you're compressing it down, but when you cut into it, the complexity, all of the ingredients are still there. It's just smushed down, obviously, because we are listening in our cars or we're listening on computer. So to the untrained ear or the non-engineer ear, 16 might not make that big of a difference from 48 or 24 or whatever. But when you start talking about the complexity or the density of the music, like when you record something at 96 and you cut into it, like you can there's less dilution that happens, you know. Unfortunately, when you talk about playing stuff in your car, or even like when you're playing stuff online, it becomes compressed. So the the less the sound, the lower the number. When that compression that happens online or whatever, you're dealing with a less complex sound, so it may differ a little bit. It's almost kind of like the difference between an MP3 and a wave. Does it really matter?
Yeah.
I hate MP3s,
Yeah.
but it's more of a complex. For me, I find that when I record something at 48, which is, I kind of feel like is the standard now. 48 is kind of like the 24/48 is kind of like the standard, where it used to be 16 and 441. There's just a bit more of a complexity to what I'm sending off versus the lowest form, which is 16 and 441. I don't know if that works for you guys, but as a drummer, like, I can kind of hear when someone records something different, you know. And then also, I think it's also about the clock that these DAWs use. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
we've all gotten tracks that if someone did something in 440 or 48, and then you bring it in at 24, it sounds slower. It was like, hey, what's going on? So the sample and the bit rate, differs. But that's my thing. I wanted to share that story because it nerded out on me, because it brought two things, food and tech, together. But like, it's like literally just like compressing down that big sandwich, and when you cut it open, everything, all of those ingredients are still in there, so it's a bit more dense.
Trammell?
Interesting. I've been struggling with this too. I recorded both, and there's one
So I'm
train of
sorry.
thought
So
that's
is 24 out the window now, or you recorded
no
24
20.
as well?
20. Yeah, the bit 24-bit is
Right.
It's the
a
standard,
standard.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but the bit rate, but the bit
Depth.
or the depth is 24. The
Mhm.
bit rate 44.1, 48, 88, 96 on up. That's the variable, and I've struggled with that because Quentin's right. 24/48 is kind of the de facto standard now. There are some people. Having said that, I record a lot at 44.1, only because it's so you get this sort of debate. It's going to get converted down to 16 44.1 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
As a WAV file. And even nowadays, if it were going to a CD, unless now I guess there are some streaming services that can do high bit rate, so maybe that's changing. But when it's converted to an MP3, it gets squashed and that's the thing I don't understand. If you can look at you look at the before and after of a WAV file converted to MP3 and look at the difference in the size, you'll have a 80 megabyte WAV file that's suddenly 12 megabytes. It's like, where did this 68 megabytes of information go, and it still sounds remotely like the song, so I still
Right.
can't figure how that works, but it does. So I think Quentin's right. So the question, because I've been struggling with this, and there's a video. I just bought some software by a company called FabFilter, which they make great compressors and EQs and limiters and stuff. And their website, if anybody's interested, indeed, if you're interested in digging deeper into this, go to the FabFilter YouTube page, and they have many videos on there. But one of the videos deals with this issue. It doesn't matter 44.1, 48, 96, 192 on the way up. Now, if you've got a super powerful computer that can handle the extra processing power that the higher bit rates require, go for it. But what was interesting about the FabFilter thing, and I'll make it quick without going to talk about nerding out. Their issue was that the difference in see, we can't hear. There's something called the Nyquist theorem, which means that it takes two data points to create a waveform. And so at 44.1, the highest frequency that those two data points can create is 22K. And so that's the highest pitch that can be recorded at 44.1. We can't hear that high. In fact, by the time you get to my age, you probably can't hear much over 13K. Uh,
Hmm.
and,
Yeah.
so the question is, well, if you can't hear past 13, what difference does it make? Or if you can't hear past 16, or maybe a teenager with really good hearing can hear 18. Um, so why are we even having this discussion if we can't hear up there anyway? Because a 48K file can reproduce a frequency up to 24K. What's the difference?
Mhm.
So what the Fab Filter video, and I encourage you, if you're interested in this, to look at, because they go way into it and do a far better job than I could ever do of describing it. But the point is, it has to do with the overtone series. So every sound, say a saxophone, if you look at this, and they demonstrate this on an oscilloscope. Here's the fundamental tone. It's A, but you're going to have the first harmonic is going to be an octave above, and it's going to be a little bit, less of the tone above, and then the second harmonic is going to be like a fifth above that, or whatever the frequencies are, and those harmonics start to get past our range of hearing, and what they talk about is if the harmonics of the sound, and this would be true of drums, which is probably why you notice the drums sounding better, especially cymbals, is that the harmonics that go beyond the range of hearing, and this is part I'm a little fuzzy on, but in essence, they double back in and create artificial harmonics, and that's called aliasing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Mhm.
so what the higher bit rates do is eliminate the aliasing, and it's the aliasing that causes the degradation of the sound more so than the fact that it's being sampled at a higher rate, as they describe it. Again, in far more detail than I'm capable of. So now they said a workaround for that, and it's something their software, and this was not like a a sales pitch or anything. This is just pure scientific kind of analyzation. Their plugins can oversample, so which means that when the sound goes in through a Fab Filter compressor, for example, or Fab Filter EQ, it's not, if your session is running at 44.1, you can turn on a oversampling, and it will convert that sound to, if it's two times, it converts it to 88.2 or 178, whatever, however many times, and so it eliminates the aliasing in the processing, and they showed some back-to-back comparisons of 44 and 48, and with oversampling enabled in the plugins, you don't hear the aliasing issues. So
Mhm.
44.1, so I think where they came down is 44, the difference in 44.1 and 44 and 48 can be uh, pretty much eliminated if you take care of the aliasing issues, whereas 48 kind of naturally helps take care of that. So now and it's also the quality of the converters. I mean, there's a lot of elements in the chain. Um, if you're to the point where aliasing of the super high frequencies that we can't hear anyway is hurting your sound, I mean, uh, it, that's assuming that you got a lot of other things right on the way in. You got to, number one, to borrow Quentin as an example, you got a great drummer playing a great drum kit with a great microphone in a great sounding room. And so by the time we get to aliasing issues over 16K, we've got so many other things that the listener's not going to notice. But so I don't know. I kind of do both. If a project comes in at 48, I'll work it at 48. I work a lot at 44.1 though still, and
Hmm.
I haven't had any complaints, but I do know there's reasons for both. Um, there's a producer, a really great producer named Darren Ron, a saxophone player out in Denver, very successful. And I had a conversation with him about this recently, and he records at 44.1 as well. So I don't know. Um, I'll say this: I kind of come down to, without getting too long-winded here. Uh,
Okay.
there's a statement that I read about tuning software once, and I think it's brilliant, and I think it applies to everything technical that we do. And the statement, now this was applied to tuners, to auto tune and waves tune, all that stuff. But what the statement is I can make it so that it's in tune, but I can't make it so that anybody will care. And so I think that's kind of at the core of what we do with technology. You know, we can make it perfect. We can make a perfect, 396K recording. Question is anybody going to care? And is it going to give you those
Right.
chill bumps that we talked about earlier? And that to me is like, it always comes back to that. We can get so caught up. And yes, the tech is important and critical. We got to master that, but never to the exclusion of the chill bumps, so to speak. So I don't know. That's my
Yeah.
D,
diatribe on that.
yeah, D said I'm getting an echo from somebody. I don't know if somebody opened their speakers up or something. But D said,
I
"Thanks,
think
guys."
it's, yeah.
D said, "Thanks, guys. Very informative." And then um, he said, "Yeah, Darren Ra is amazing." Is that
Yes,
who you?
he
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
Yeah, Darren Ron. Yeah, he's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
guys, look, we've been at this for almost an hour. So I need to
That's
ask
Wow.
you all.
crazy.
I want to ask you all a favor. Can we please come back and do a
Yep.
part two?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can we come back and do a part
Let's
Absolutely.
two?
do it.
Okay, so I don't want to. I know you got some mixing and recording. Q, you didn't get a chance to answer the idea because I know that you have a little one upstairs. So when you're playing in terms of the acoustics and stuff like
Oh
that.
man. The crazy thing is that was when I bought this house, that was the thing. I inherited the space. The basement was here, but it was bare bones. And to Tramel's point, um, when I brought in a construction guy and I told him I wanted to build a studio, and he was like, "Oh, you want a soundproof?" And basically, um, he was basically talking about building a room within a room so that
Mm-hmm.
there's space between the studio wall and the concrete wall because that's where the sound would die basically. So it would have been 2 feet off of the ceiling, 2 feet off of the floor, 2 feet off of each wall, which then would have left me with a very small room. And the reflection that you guys are talking about, um I wanted to what became apparent to me was that treatment was more important than proofing, because with treatment, effective treatment, you will get some level of proofing. It might not be to the point where everything is dead silent, but to the point where it's not necessarily harmful. Like I have a 10-month-old kid that's asleep right now, but I could play at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and he won't hear me simply because I have double stuff. I actually have, let me see if I can show you. I actually have a drop ceiling installed in between the drop ceiling and the subfloor upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
There is a combination of rock wool
Mm-hmm.
and insulation. Obviously, the
Yeah.
um, insulation is for temperature, but also it's a lot of it up there. And
Yeah.
like even if I took one of those tiles down, it would take me forever to get one of those tiles down because it's literally stuffed in there. But I think we all as spirit animals because those baffles, I actually built those baffles myself. If you remember, what was the name of the computer store off of across 85 from Guitar Center? Was it not Studio Center? What was the name of it?
I know
Pro
exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Pro audio or something.
yeah,
Chick Cusack,
Chick
not Chick
Kus.
Cusack.
Yep, that's
Chick
him.
something. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yep. So I went in there and they actually had a company that would, some people call it rock wool. Overseas in London they call it rock wool. In the
Uh-huh.
States they call it rigid insulation, which was
Uh-huh.
basically sheets like petrified sheets of the same insulation.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Home Depot and got 1x4s, mitered the corners,
Yep.
built my frame, put L brackets on the inside of the frame, and then put countersinking screws on the outside of that. Put that down on those rock wool sheets. Those rock wool sheets were like 6x6 feet,
Mm-hmm.
and just literally cut out the frame, stomped on it, and then the wood frame had the rock wool on the inside of it. And then I went to, I believe it was Annis Fabrics up in Kennesaw
Yeah.
and got some micro
Joanne, yeah.
suede and
Yeah.
stapled it down. And the
Yeah.
only reason why, and I wish I was this smart, but my reason for doing it was to get sound treatment, but I have one window in the basement and I didn't want that window to be seen. So I used that as my template of how big I wanted the actual baffle to be.
Oh yeah.
And so I went maybe
So they
like three
match.
feet
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right. So I went 3 feet per on each wall. And when I put those up in between what I did in the ceiling and what I did on the walls, it took a um the reflection away enough so I could still have a live room and not dead. Like, because with drums, you don't necessarily want a reflectionless room. You just don't want the reflection to get away from you to the sound to the point where it doesn't feel natural. Like playing an acoustic instrument, there still has to be some air moving in the room to give the live drums feel. Because if not, you might as well just program the drums or use MIDI drums.
Interesting.
So for me, the room mics allow me to create more space, you know,
Yeah.
instead of just the overheads. Like, so the overheads give me a direct sound of what the drums sound like as one instrument, but the room mics allow me to make it like, if you want to hear the drums what they sound like if they were next door or in a cathedral in a hallway, or if I need a very
Right.
close tight sound, I'll just turn the room mics off altogether. So for me,
Yeah.
it's almost one of those things where it's better to have it and not need it and not have it.
Mm-hmm.
um and one thing I did do with the floor, after we put the self-leveling concrete down, because it's a basement floor, so it's not necessarily, there are dips and whatever. We did self-leveling concrete. We did a moisture guard, and then right before we put the laminate down, I took plies of sheets of maple wood sheets, and I put
Wow.
that down right under the laminate,
Cool.
because when you think about drums, like carpet will suck up too much of the natural drum sound. And most of the studios that I was going into, you would see wood floors, because that wood is so warm and it just kind of helped contribute to the sound of the drums. And I wanted that, and I wasn't sure if laminate was going to give me that. So I took maple sheets and had that put on the floor before we put the laminate down.
Oh wow.
So it responds like a real wood floor. I didn't want to go with real wood floors simply because we're in the basement, and with the expanding and contracting, God forbid
Yeah.
there was a flood, which actually did happen to me 2 years ago. I don't even want to get into that, but
Wow.
it would have been a lot more expensive
Welcome.
to replace and all of that stuff. So um, like Trammell said before, I don't know how perfect my room is by the standards of the studio guides, but what I know is I get a great sound for what I'm looking for. I've never had anyone complain about what they're getting back from me.
Well, maybe I.
And a
I'm
lot
sorry.
of times, oh, here we go. I knew it was happening. I knew it was going to come. It took an hour, but I knew it was happening.
uh,
But for me, the biggest thing was just I wanted to create a sound that I was hearing in my head. Like when I listen to my drums naturally, a lot
yeah.
of the
You can
work
hear that.
happens from the drums in the room before they even hits microphones.
Mm-hmm.
If my natural sound is great, it leaves less room for a producer or an engineer to do. There's been some records, like I cut a record for, I'm not gonna name drop, but for another artist, and the producer called me. He was like, "Hey man, your drums sound great. Can you just send me a 2 track of that? I'm just gonna use that."
Wow.
And I was like,
Wow.
"You don't want the individual?" He was like, "No, like send me exactly what you did. Like give me a bounce by itself. It sounds great." And when I listened to that record, I was like, "That's the best sounding drums on the record," simply because they
Yeah.
use close mics on everything else, and you know tried to do everything, and mine is just a stereo bounce. So
Mm-hmm.
uh it just needs to work for me, need to make sense for me. And as a nerd, you're always on that pursuit of making sure that you're on top of your game. It never ends. Someone asked me the other day, "Are you happy with your sound?" I was like, "I am right now." It was like, "Well, what would you change?" I was like, "I don't know yet."
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't. It only stops when you achieve like that thing until something else like, man, I really want to get in. I'm getting now into more of the vintage sound and understanding what I need to do to get that very vintage Beatles Abbey Road sound out of my drum
Hmm.
kit. And
Hmm.
I'm sorry, Q. I
I'm
didn't get a chance to say it, but didn't you do some work at Abbey Road, Trammell?
I did. I had the good
Did you know that,
fortune
see
Q?
to
legend.
some.
No, I didn't because
No.
he doesn't lead with this stuff. He needs to lead with this stuff, and then I'll
Okay.
know that I'm sitting with royalty.
I didn't get a
Yeah.
chance to get
Right.
into that in his
Right.
intro, but he's done some stuff like at Abbey. Like, really?
I had the good fortune to do 5 records there. I went through a period. I won't get deep into it, but in the mid to late '90s, doing orchestral. We called it orchestral pops at the time, but it was orchestral music with orchestral versions of like I did an album with Peter Gabriel music and different things like that, and ended
Okay,
up
all
not for
right.
Peter Gabriel, not with Peter Gabriel, his songs.
Sure, he
Be
wouldn't
clear
tell us.
about
He
that.
wouldn't tell us now because you just put him on the spot. No,
No,
but
but
you
but
know,
but I got a chance to work there, and that was, I mean, that I asked the engineer, the I don't know, first time I got to work there was they have a cafe in a little restaurant, or um, cafeteria kind of thing in the basement. And we were sitting there having lunch, and his name is Peter Cobb, and he's a chief engineer, still there, I think. And I said, so what's it like working at Abbey Road? And he said, well, as an engineer, this is Mecca. He said, you know that room we're working in? I said, yeah. He said, that's where stereo was invented. So it takes on a whole, you
Wow.
know, we're a whole different kind of thing. And to your point about wood floors, there's a quick little anecdote about Abbey Road. Um, so I did orchestral records there. Did a couple with the London Symphony and some other the thing called the London Session Orchestra, which is like an all-star group. They'll handpick orchestra players from different orchestras, but they're all like the first and second chair players. So anyway, um, they if you look at a picture of Abbey Road Studio One, it's the biggest room there. There's parquet on the floors. And at some point, I worked there in the late '90s. So at some point, I don't know, in the early '90s or whatever, they were going to refurbish the room, and they were going to replace the parquet. So talk about nerds. They took up some of the parquet floor, had it analyzed in some sort of scientific lab for reflection and absorption, and then they were going to try to find new wood that had the same acoustic properties as the parquet that had been there since 1930. They couldn't find any. They'd searched high and low, and so they took up the parquet floor, refinished it, and put it back down. So that's how
Wow.
nerded out they are. So, but yeah, it was a cool experience
Yeah,
to
Q.
to
Like,
uh,
really? This
to
dude, yeah. Abbey
no, man,
Road, yeah.
it's just cool. I'm standing there with my jaw on the floor, like I'm in Abbey Road. I can't believe this. So I mean, I was, it's not like I had the record label's money to play with, so they didn't invite me. I hired them, so it's the difference. But yeah, it was. Uh, but talk about acoustics, and I forget how we started on that topic, but
Q was talking
um,
about getting that
just
sound.
drums in my room
Hmm.
and getting that
yeah,
sound, man. It's one of those things that's my next. That's the thing that I'm working on. So I'm actually building movable baffles now
yeah,
to be able to close in on that sound and
right, yeah,
just kind of open up the drums a little bit more or bring them down less with those baffles just by the positioning of them.
sure,
Basically, it'll be what I built on the walls, maybe half the height of those, but they'll just be on
hmm,
wheels, so they'll be modular. And I'll
yeah,
just be able to kind of place them where I want, record, hear the sweet spots where it'd be like, okay, this is what I'm looking for, and mark the floor. Just put the masking tape down on the floor and just know
yeah,
exactly where I need to put them to be able to replicate that. Because for me, the success is not just being able to about doing it one time. Success is being able to do it at a high level and replicate the success, the result over and over again. So like when I find something that works, like it took me maybe about a good 6 months to really understand my room and know, okay, if I'm going for this sound, this is where the microphones need to be. This is how far the microphones need to be in relation to the drums, placement of the microphones, which is all important. It's not just about putting the microphones on the drum kit. It's about understanding what sound I'm going for and angling to get that, making sure that you're getting the sound, but making sure that the microphones are still in phase,
Yeah.
just
Oh, yeah.
like different things like that. So I did a real deep dive and went into a rabbit hole as far as placement and all that stuff, which kind of agitates me now when I play on the live side. A front of house engineer may have the drums super gated or a bunch of compression or
Yeah.
something, and I'm telling him, hey, can you loosen the gate on the kick drum? And he was like, there's no gate on the kick drum. I was like, please don't tell me I'm the only one that hears this. And he was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh,
Toot, toot.
you
Yeah.
really know what you're talking about. And it's
Yeah.
not that I'm an aficionado or anything, but like being in here just tunes your ear and trains your ears to listen to certain things. And, you know, and
Well,
that's the
I have a
beautiful part
question.
about being a nerd.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're running close on time, but I have a question for Q.
Mm.
Something I know nothing about, but I know it's an issue. Tuning the drums. Talk about how you
Ooh.
approach tuning.
Okay, so tuning for me, when people say tune their drums, a lot of times drummers will grab the drum key and just start going to work on the top head. Um,
Hmm.
your tone of your drums, the quality of your tone from your drums come from your bottom head. Um,
Hmm.
so what happens is when you strike the drum resonates through the shell, and the bottom head brings that sound back out. So there has to be a relative pitch relationship between your top and your bottom head. What I've found that works for me is that my bottom head is always a little tighter than my top head.
Hmm.
Because my top head, while tone is important on my top head, that's more about feel. The bottom head is the thing that's actually articulating the tone that you're getting from the shell. Um, Depending on the drums that you have in the drum heads that you're using, that relationship changes. If I'm going for more of a Beatles sound or thuddier sound, the bottom head comes completely off because I'm not looking for tone, I'm looking for percussiveness. And the
Okay.
tone that I will get will come from the only drum head, which is the top head. But
Yeah.
if you go back and you listen to a lot of those Beatles records or like even some of those Eagles records or some of those Chicago records, all you heard was do, 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 do. You didn't really hear
Yeah. No
boom,
ring.
boom, boom, which is
Yeah.
more of a popular sound now than before. Um,
Hmm.
so I think a lot of times for me, it is number one, understanding what I'm recording and who I'm recording for, the sound that they're trying to get, and then understanding the relationship on my drums. I know my drums well enough to, I don't even have to hear them. I can feel where the tension is in the head in the relationship between the top and the bottom head in tune off of feel. It's like if my top head and my bottom head are in tune with each other, they move, the frequencies move the same way. But if
Hmm.
my bottom head is too tight and my top head is too loose, you get this thing where they're not moving together and you get a crosstalk of negative energy. And it's like you
Hmm.
like hitting concrete or hitting your
Wow.
hand on a brick surface. But when both heads are in tune, it feels smooth. And you can feel
Wow.
that through the stick and through your hand. Like there's a smoothness that happens and there's no resistance to the tone. So like you got to get those two heads to talk right, talk together. And one way real quickly to do that is to mute one head, go maybe about an inch away from each tuning mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
and tap. You don't have to hit the drums to tune them. Just tap and hear the harmonic and make sure that each one of those tuning lugs are harmonically sound with each other. and do the same
Oh,
thing on the other side. And once you do
okay.
that, the tone of the drums will be equal. And then at that point, it's just finding the compromise between feel and tone.
Hmm.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
And last question: Do you ever have you ever mic'd the bottom of a tom?
say it again.
Do you ever mic the bottom of a tom? Do bottom mics on the toms?
Ugh, not a lot. The only time I do that is when it's requested by an engineer or a producer that's going for a particular thing.
Mm,
The May miking system used to do something similar where they would actually internally mount the microphones on the inside of the drum. The issue with that is that you will only get the tone. So a lot of times if you're trying to mic the bottom tom, the bottom
mm,
head, is because you want more tone than percussiveness or pat. Like if
okay.
you mic just the bottom, you're getting more boom instead of
Yeah.
bop,
Yeah.
boom.
Hmm.
A good microphone will give you both.
Mm,
Hmm.
You get what I'm saying? But sometimes
sure.
if you want more tone than percussiveness, you can do that. But the only thing that I really mic the bottom of is the snare.
Yeah.
So, quick
Yeah.
question, Q. So,
Cool.
when you mentioned the positioning of your mics, the positioning of your mics,
Mm-hmm.
are you actually taking pictures? Like for this song, I had my mics an inch away from here, or how are you recording your mic placement as you are?
Well, through repetition, and just doing it over and over and over, like I don't have to do that anymore. I can pretty much eyeball it. One rule of thumb for me is the three-finger rule. Like each microphone, like I should be able to stick three fingers, aim the microphone towards the center of the drum because that's where your main tone is coming from. You see a lot of drummers or engineers, they'll take the microphones, put them on the drum, and angle them right at the edge. Well, that's where your harmonics are coming from, and that's where your overtones are coming from. The purest
Mm,
tone of your drums is going to come from the center of the head. That's why even in marching band and orchestral music, you're taught to hit the center of the drum because that's where the purest tone is and the less harmonics. So three fingers under the microphone, my bottom finger, my ring finger is actually on the head, and this top finger is the bottom of the microphone, and that will give me the same distance
mm-hmm.
between each drum head. And at that point, it's just to taste. You get what I'm saying?
Hmm. Hmm.
Honestly, I don't use a lot of tom mic because we don't hear drums individually. Although there are a bunch of drums back there, how we hear the drums mainly are through the overheads because we hear it as one instrument. So a lot of times I'll make sure that my overheads sound great. And then I'm just capturing sound. So an engineer like Tremor was like, I want a little bit more kick drum. And he can actually dial in as much kick drum as he wants, but the overheads are giving you the snapshot, if you will, of the kit and what it
Mm,
sounds like. So there's some songs that I don't need the hi-hat microphone because the
mm-hmm.
overheads have picked it up enough.
Mm-hmm.
Or the snare, you get what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So like it really just kind of depends. But I think I answered your question, but directly because of repetition, I don't necessarily have to take the measuring tape and go from the center of the drum to the overhead to the left and the overhead to the right because I know where they sit in my room,
Gotcha.
or
Makes
the
yeah.
piece of rope that they'll take and put it in the middle of the drum to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that the center of the overhead marks are equidistant to the center of the drum. So the relationship of when the sound disperses, it's capturing the sound at the same time, so you don't get the phasing things or the displacement in sound where your left overhead might be here and your right overhead might be slightly behind it, and then you have to fix it in phasing or using a third party software to fix it. You know,
Gotcha.
so
Hey, Tremel, Jim
Yeah.
Ayers. Jim Ayers says
Yes.
thanks. He learned a lot. He hadn't seen you in 30 years.
Oh wow, Jim, what's up, man?
Yeah. So
Awesome.
he said he's
is
looking
that
for
a
part.
shark he's holding?
Is that a shark?
I don't know.
It does look like it looks like a baby shark. Yes, it looks like a baby shark.
Wow.
It looks like a baby shark. Yeah.
Wow. I'd put that down.
Baby shark.
Say I put that down.
Uh,
Well, guys, look, as much as I don't want to, I am going to say that we should end right now and save more for part 2. But before we end, Trammell, can we go out on Summer Breeze? Can you tell us a little bit about this recording that you did of Summer Breeze?
Sure. This was kind of my first foray into smooth jazz for Smooth Jazz Radio. I did this, I think, in 2012, 2013, sometime in there. And so the track is Sonny Emery on drums. I didn't know Quentin then, otherwise it would have been Quentin. And Chris Blackwell.
Listen, you got the I Ching. That's the I Ching. Like, there's no one else.
No,
Okay.
no, man, you're there, brother. You're it. You're it. Chris Blackwell on guitar, great guitarist here in town.
Yes.
He's got a cool project that we're just kind of getting of his own that we're starting on.
I'm sorry, Trammell, hold that thought 1 second. I got to throw this on screen real quick. Wes Bird says, how can he have an opportunity to work with you guys?
Oh my God, tell him to shut up. I'm just going to be super weird and rude to him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
West, okay,
We
West.
got some tracks to be finishing.
He's that guy that I say, if he's in the room, I'm not a keyboard player. So I don't claim
You
that
did
at
say
all.
that earlier. You did.
I sure did. If West is
Right.
around, I don't play keys.
He's a bomb. He's a bomb.
That's right. But yeah, so it's Sonny, keyboard bass, Chris Blackwell on guitar, a guy named Jeff McBride singing lead vocal, background vocals.
You don't have to talk fast. Trammell, slow down. You have to talk fast. It's okay.
Oh,
we
we're
got
not in a
time.
hurry. Okay,
No, we're not in a hurry.
All right, sorry. Tony Hightower, Cheryl Rogers, and Alfreda Gerald on background vocals. And that's it.
Wow.
Wes claims that we're giving great info, guys. So, it's the nerd talk.
Cool.
So,
Awesome.
Wes, since you're on the spot, since I know you're a nerd as well, so when we come back for part 2, I need you to put on the screen right now that you agree to come back with us and be the fourth stooge.
Peer pressure.
Yes.
Pressure.
No
Yes.
pressure, Wes, but we're waiting.
That's right.
We're going to wait for you to
right.
respond to that, West. You're going to come back for part 2, West?
It's just done. It's done.
It's done. We're going to claim it. We're going to claim it and say it's done.
Come on, man.
I'm going to claim being West's manager. Yes, he'll be there. What time do you need it?
There it is. Well, I won't put you on the spot
Yeah.
too much, guys. But he really? That's what he said, guys.
No. Oh, okay. Well, he has a competing.
No,
show
he's
on
diving
Sunday
deep.
night, so.
He's diving deep into some tech stuff too. We had a couple of conversations this week. He definitely needs to be on this next one, to talk about that stuff. Particularly, Wes and I work a lot on the live side of things. So, taking that tech out of the studio and bringing it onto the stage, he's
Here we have it.
All right. Yes, done.
Here we go.
All right.
There we go. It's etched in stone now, West. It's etched in stone. So part 2, everybody, part 2 will be coming up. I want to thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Trammell, for joining right here on M3 Live. I want everybody to know that M3 Live is not just where we come and perform, but because all of us have that nerd side, this is where we come to hang out a little bit. And, once again, if you just happen to be watching this on YouTube, but right now we're going to ask Trammell. We have Summer Breeze coming up, and this is how we're going to say goodnight to you. We'll be back next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, man. Thank you for doing this.
Summer Breeze, absolutely. We'll see you back for part 2. Here we go.
Later.
See the curtains hanging in the window in the evening on a Friday night. light shining through the window lets me know everything's alright. See the baby lying on the sidewalk, a little music from the house next door. So I walk on up to the doorstep, to the screen, and across the floor. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, throwing little jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, throwing little jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, throwing little jasmine in my mind. See the smile awakened in the kitchen, food cooking, and the baseball too. Feel the arms that reach out to hold me in the evening when the day is through. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Days of summer, the jasmine's in bloom. July is dressed up and playing the tune. When I come home from a hard day's work, and you're waiting there, not a care in the world. See the curtains hanging in the window in the evening on a Friday. A little light shining through the window lets me know everything is gonna be alright. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Everything's alright, makes me feel so fine. Everything's alright, makes me feel so fine.
Yeah, guys, that was Summer Breeze from Trammell, and we're going to say goodnight on that one, man. Thank you, guys. Stay tuned for part 2 coming up real shortly. Thank you again, Q. Thank you, Trammell.
Thanks, everybody.
I am M3.
Thank
We'll see y'all
you.
next time.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.